The story of The Lord of the Rings Online is divided into volumes, which contain about 10 to 15 books, which themselves contain about 10 to 15 quests. At the time of writing, 6 volumes have been released: The Shadows of Angmar, The Mines of Moria, The Allies of the King, The Strength of Sauron, The Black Book of Mordor, and as last, The Legacy of Durin and The Trials of the Dwarves. These volumes can span multiple expansions and can be seen as a single story arc. All of these volumes combined contain between 600 or 1350, often quite lengthy quests. I will not be able to cover everything that happens in there, as this is 15 years of content after all. I will just give you a broad overview so you have an idea of how the stories feel and how they fit with the source material. The first volume, The Shadows of Angmar, plays out at around the same time as the Lord of the Rings story and only occasionally intersects with it. Most of the time you are just behind or just ahead of the Fellowship. First volume story shares some of its aspects with games like War in the North or Battle for Middle-earth 2. During the War of the Ring, not just Gondor and Rohan, but all peoples all over Middle-earth experience conflict. The premise of Shadows of Angmar is that a dark power has returned to the old kingdom of Angmar in the north and threatens Eriador, the northwestern part of Middle-earth. You begin as a sort of nobody in your respective starting area, which can be the Shire, Ered Luin, or Breland. After proving yourself skilled and helpful in your starter region, you will go through Breland, where you aid Aragorn in his search for Frodo and the hobbits. While you are following the hobbits' tracks through the old forest, they find Aragorn in Bree and leave for Rivendell. During your stint in Breland, you discover the Witch King is building an army once again in Angmar, and explain this to Gandalf, who you find at the Prancing Pony after Aragorn has left. Gandalf is worried about this and explains that during his escape from the Tower of Orthanc, Gwaihir the Eagle told him of a dangerous corruption in the Lone Lands, which is the area of land surrounding Weathertop, where Aragorn and the hobbits are currently traveling through. In this region you help the wizard Radagast the Brown with defeating a corrupted river spirit. Lore buffs will know that Radagast traveled to the north with a message for Gandalf from Saruman, which in the books is the reason why Gandalf is lured to Orthanc in the first place. During this exchange, however, Gandalf asks Radagast to aid against the powers of evil wherever he can. Therefore, the presence of Radagast in the Lone Lands has some precedence in the books. After aiding in the Lone Lands, you are asked to go to the North Downs, where the headquarters of the Dunedain are located in the town of Esteldin. You aid the leader of the Rangers, Halbarad, who is taking the lead while Aragorn is on his quest, with keeping the region around Esteldin safe. After this, you travel to Rivendell to deliver news of your deeds to Aragorn, after which you are asked to scout the region around Rivendell for the Black Riders who were washed away in the flood of the river Bruinen. You follow the path of the Ringwraith you encounter through to the Misty Mountains and all the way to Angmar. There you temporarily defeat the current steward of Angmar, Mordorith. However, during this fight, the Palantir Mordorith had in his possession, which he presumably retrieved from the Bay of Forogel, where it lay on the bottom of the ice-cold water, was stolen by a mysterious old lady named Sarah Oakheart. While following this lady, she casts off her disguise, and you discover her to be a servant of Mordor called Amarthiel, who possesses the body of an elven maiden called Narmeleth as a vessel. The rest of the story revolves around discovering the history of Narmeleth and preventing Amarthiel from becoming the new ruler of Angmar. You discover Narmeleth was once an elf of Eregion, and was beguiled by Sauron in disguise to learn how to create rings of power during the Second Age when Sauron dwelt in Eregion as Anatar the Gift Lord. Amarthiel is trying to fight her old lesser ring of power, Narghuil. After the player finds the ring broken in two, Amarthiel lures you to the ring forges of Eregion and steals the ring parts from you. Using Narmeleth's knowledge, she tries to repair the ring. And though the player and Narmeleth's father Laerdan try to stop her, she succeeds. Just before Amarthiel is ready to claim the throne of Angmar, Mordorith returns and slays her father. The grief of Narmeleth over losing her father and the loss of the chance of becoming the ruler of Angmar breaks Amarthiel's grip over the elf maiden, and she returns to her former self. Together you manage in the end to slay Mordorith, seemingly for good, but not before he inflicts a mortal wound on Narmeleth, who perishes. While I covered it quite quickly, the story of Amartya is one of the best written ones in-game. Taking place over several books of the first volume, you really get a sense of the tragedy that has befallen her. Additionally, right before he is slain, Laerdan reveals the true identity of Mordorith. His name of old was Eärnur, a canon character who was the last king of Gondor and disappeared when he rode to Minas Morgul to accept a challenge from the Witch King to a personal duel. The next volume starts with the departure of the Fellowship of the Ring from Rivendell. You have completed your hunt in Angmar during the 2-month stay they enjoy in Rivendell, and after the Fellowship has left, you join an expedition called the Iron Garrison, who are attempting to visit Balin's expedition and help him reclaim Moria. During this expedition, you help the Dwarves gain a foothold in Moria, which you reach after the Fellowship has passed through it. The effects of their passage are clear. The mines are filled with orcs, the Balrog lies dead on the peak of Siraxigil, and many passages like the Durin's Way from the Tomb of Balin and the Bridge of Khazad-dûm are broken. After learning of the defeat of Balin's expedition and the finding of the axe of Durin himself, the Iron Garrison has several battles with the orcs inside Moria. Eventually you discover an emissary from Dol Guldur, Sauron's fortress of old in southern Mirkwood, is raising evil spirits deep below the mines. The dwarves ask for aid from the elves of Lothlorien, which they reluctantly give. The player character captures the leader of the orcs of Moria responsible for Balin's death, named Mazoch, and escort him to Lothlorien. There you reunite with the Fellowship as they rest in Lothlorien, and you are asked to help out with an attack on Dol Guldur in southern Mirkwood. You travel in secret through Mirkwood while guarding Mazoch with a company of elves, as you intend to exchange him for dwarven prisoners and the mithril axe of Durin, which was taken from you in Moria. While the exchange ultimately fails, a surprise attack is launched on the fortress by taking the secret passage Gandalf used to search for Thorin Oakenshield's father, Thrain. This attack is successful and you drive the Witch King from his fortress. While this volume covers a lot less ground, LOTRO's version of Moria is truly a sight to behold. Eventually the Iron Garrison does decide to retreat from Moria, as according to the books it is truly recaptured somewhere in the 4th Age by a dwarf called Durin the 7th. Now we come to one of my favorite volumes. You are summoned by Elrond and travel to Rivendell, and are asked to join a group of rangers called the Grey Company, who are riding south to join their chieftain Aragorn in war. Book readers may remember this group, as they find Aragorn after he visited the fallen Isengard together with Theoden. They bring him a furled kingly standard, which is a gift from Arwen, and they bring him Elrond's advice to take the paths of the dead. You gather this company of rangers together, as you have met most of them during your travels in Eriador. You visit them all and ask them to join the company, which most of them do. You ride towards the south, where you eventually reach Dunland, which is under the influence of the White Hand of Saruman. You spend quite a while aiding the Falcon clan, a group of Dunlandings who are rebelling against Saruman, and you aid them with attacking other Dunlanding settlements and gathering supplies. Ultimately, they betray you and sell you out to Saruman, as he had promised to give them the land the Rohirrim once took from them back. You spend your time in the pits of Isengard doing menial tasks for your oppressive overseers, and eventually you manage to escape. After recapturing some of your allies from the Dunlandings, you part ways with the Grey Company and stay with Prince Theodred of Rohan as he attempts to defend the Fort of the Isen from the White Hand forces. We know, of course, from the films and the books that this ends with the death of Theodred, and after the battle he is buried at the fort according to his last wishes, the same as it was in the books. You, as the player character, experience troubling dreams after this battle and travel to Lothlorien to seek counsel from Galadriel. There you meet Gandalf the White, who has returned from the Beyond to aid the peoples of Middle-earth once more. After explaining your dreams, you are told to track the Fellowship along the great river Anduin, as they seem to be in danger. While following this track, you come across the corpse of a fell beast, a flying mount of a Nazgul, which Legolas had shot down from the sky while they were traveling on the river at night in the books. You encounter the Nazgul itself, and after driving it off, you are tasked with following the path of the Fellowship along the river. You visit Amon Hen, the location of Boromir's death, and learn of the breaking of the Fellowship. After this, you travel towards Rohan and learn of Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli's pursuit of the Uruk-hai. Then you decide to follow their trail instead of the one of the hobbits. You ultimately find Éomer, and after learning of the destruction of the Uruk-hai, you travel with him to Edoras, where Éomer is banished after he insults Grima Wormtongue. You are banished as well, and spend some time in the other regions of Rohan, where you try to hinder the White Hand as much as you can. The signs of war upon the land are so heavy that you decide, banished or not, that the king must be informed. You time your visit well, as you enter the Golden Hall while Gandalf relieves the king of his influence from Grima Wormtongue and Saruman, and he lifts your banishment. During the rest of this volume, you help with the war preparations and rout traitors throughout the whole of Rohan, and ultimately you join the fight at Helm's Deep, where you aid in the defeat of Saruman. After visiting an overthrown Isengard, where you also find one of your companions of the Grey Company you had to leave behind during your own escape, the volume ends. The next volume adheres quite closely to the journey of Aragorn as he tries to reach Minas Tirith. You join him and the Grey Company in their travels through the Pass of the Dead, where you witness Aragorn recruit the army of the dead at the Stone of Erech, where they were once cursed by Isildur. You journey through southern Gondor, past Dol Amroth and towards the Umbar ships moored at Pelargir. This fleet you help overtake with the aid of the army of the dead, after which they are released from their curse by Aragorn. The ships are filled with soldiers gathered in southern Gondor, and they prepare themselves for battle. You, in the meanwhile, travel to southern Ithilien, where you meet up with Faramir and Osgiliath. You find the city nearly fallen and you retreat to Minas Tirith, where you will aid in the siege of the city. During your time in Osgiliath and in Minas Tirith, you encounter Gothmog, a reincarnated Mordorith who serves as the commander of the armies of the Pelennor Fields, together with the Witch King. Gandalf asks you in Minas Tirith to ride out in search of the Riders of Rohan, without whose aid the battle will for sure be lost. You leave the city before the full attack begins and join the Riders of Rohan as they pass through the woods of the Druadan, the woodmen who show the Rohirrim a safe route towards Minas Tirith on an old mountain path. With the Rohirrim you aid in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields and help defeat the host of Mordor. In this battle, many of the characters you met during your adventures will die, as quite a few rangers from the Grey Company who you traveled with will perish, including Halbarad, who is specifically mentioned in the books. After this loss you march with the King Elessar, after witnessing him heal victims of the Witch King's Black Breath, towards the Black Gate. You march through Ithilien, sounding the challenge to any forces of evil who will hear. During this march, a few of the men who fear the battle with Mordor are allowed to split and clear out the river island of Caer Andros of any remaining forces. This is also described in the books, and the player character can help these soldiers out for a short while. This volume ends with the battle at the Black Gate and the destruction of the One Ring, thus ending Sauron's reign on Middle-earth. After you witness the Fellowship regrouping at the Fields of Cormallen and the coronation and wedding of Aragorn, the volume ends, and the story of the ring comes to an end as well. We are not done, however, as the Fourth Age has now begun, and many exciting works are yet to be finished. Though the great enemy of the Free Peoples has been defeated, there are still many forces of evil nested in the land of Mordor. Though we know from the books that the land of Mordor will eventually be given to the defeated enemies of Gondor by King Elessar, the player character will help make sure no more evil may come out of that land. After entering Mordor and exploring the dungeons of its many fortresses, the mouth of Sauron comes to treat with the newly crowned King Elessar. He acknowledges Aragorn's authority and asks to become his subject if he is allowed to rule what is left of Mordor. His terms are rejected, and a freed Easterling commander reveals to you a group of powerful servants called the Gurzul, or the Deathless, may still unite the forces of Mordor. While spying on a secret meeting of the Gurzul, the player witnesses Lareth the Stained, a poisoner who was responsible for a great plague that nearly wiped out the northern kingdom of Arnor in the Second Age, assume control and kill the Mouth of Sauron, in-game called Dulgabeth. One of the Gurzul was missing from this meeting, Karasgar the Weeping Warrior, who is rumored to be searching for an artifact in Dol Guldur. The player is sent to Dol Guldur to investigate, and after you come back empty-handed, Galadriel brings down the fortress, as is described in the appendices of the Return of the King. From here you are invited by King Thranduil of Mirkwood to join him at his hall in Felagoth, and from there you travel to a rebuilt lake town and Erebor in search of Karasgar. You reach the Lonely Mountain and search through it, but you end up with nothing, and you are sent to the Iron Hills to collect the son of the king under the mountain and bring him back to Erebor now that the War of the Ring is over. In the Iron Mountains, you find a secret room where a black book with Sauron's eye on the cover is found. This book is given to Gandalf to study, and meanwhile the player is once again sent after the king's son, named Durin VII, because he has left Erebor in the meanwhile with a band of dwarves to reclaim the old dwarf holds in the Grey Mountains. Here the player runs into Karasgar, who has made dominion over a frost wraith, killing many dwarves in an attempt to force them to leave. During the final confrontation in the dwarf homes, Karasgar is beaten by Gandalf, but not before Karasgar notices the book Gandalf is holding. Due to Karasgar's desire for the book, Gandalf doubles his attempts to decipher it and brings it to Beorn's house in the Vales of the Anduin, where he may study it safely. You also find Elrond and his household there as they are on their way to the wedding of Arwen and Aragorn. While you are there, Gandalf sends you to the Gladden Fields, where the woodmen report a shade has been seen wandering around the fields the race of hobbits once called home. After finding the shade, Elrond recognizes him to be none other than King Isildur, who was slain at this spot by orc arrows. You relive Isildur's memories by playing through a small area of Mordor as it was during the Second Age, during the siege of Barad-dûr and just before the Battle of the Last Alliance. From here, Isildur tells the player he has visions of a dark tower, and Gandalf surmises this is Minas Morgul, and he thinks Isildur's remains may have been brought there by the dark powers while they were searching for the ring in the Gladden Fields. The player enters the city with the help from Faramir's rangers, and you fight your way through the rings of the city filled with ghosts and monsters. Meanwhile, it is also being attacked by the Gurzul, who want to overthrow Gothmog, who is currently settled in Minas Morgul. With the mask Gandalf took from Karasgar back in the Grey Mountains, the player enters the upper chambers of Minas Morgul and confronts Gothmog. By reminding him of its defeats as Eärnur and Mordorith, the player character overpowers Gothmog, and he dies in a duel with the Gurzul Ugrugor just after he manages to slay his opponent. A casket filled with the dust of Isildur's bones is brought to Rivendell, completing his old oath of delivering the ring of the enemy and himself to Elrond's last homely house. And so Isildur finally departs from the world of the living. In the epilogue, the content of the Black Book of Mordor is finally revealed by Gandalf. It turns out not to be a dark artifact, but a tale written down by a dwarf called Voin, who once was a friend to King Eärnur of Gondor. When Eärnur disappeared at Minas Morgul, Voin left his wife and children to search for his old friend. He entered Mordor as a slave and labored in the Dark Land for years until he managed to get himself to the city where he reunites with Eärnur, who is bound there by a spell from the Witch King. After comforting Eärnur during his years of torture, Voin escapes the city when he sees his old friend be erased and rewrought into the wraith Mordorith. Once back home, he wrote an account of the life of the last king of Gondor, so he would never be forgotten. And this book he hid in a secret chamber in his house, where the player character would find it ages later. I played this story literally a decade after I first battled with Mordorith back into the Shadows of Angmar. and to see the tragic downfall of the character that would later become your own mortal enemy truthfully brought tears to my eyes. This arc really shows the power of running a storyline over literal years. Such a throwback can be incredibly powerful. This last volume I had not actually finished myself when I started making this video, so I went ahead and completed the story, so I can now tell you all of it. This story begins with the character we left halfway through the previous volume, Durin VII. Back in the Grey Mountains, the multiple clans of dwarves who managed to recapture their homes of old grow increasingly frustrated with each other. While trying to ease this frustration, Durin disappears and is found near an ice sheet called the Anvil of Winterstith. After recovering from the trance you found him in, Durin explains to you he heard a voice coming from the ice, and it spoke to him of dwarves long dead and the great deeds they accomplished. This inspired him to attempt to reclaim the lost dwarven city of Gundabad, where Durin the Deathless, the first of the dwarves and the father of the Longbeard clan, once awoke before he established the realm of Moria. The player is sent towards Gundabad to measure the orcish presence in the region, and after surviving an assault on a local village of men, you learn from one of the slain enemies that a new leader is rising in Gundabad, Gorgar the Ruthless, and he is preparing for war. This convinces the dwarves to prepare, and with an army combined of several dwarf clans you march towards Gundabad and fight in a war against the orcs. After the orcs retreat inside Gundabad and the entrance is closed by Rimil Frostheart, a frost dragon, the dwarves emerge victorious and regroup before the gate of Gundabad. Their army is magnified by the addition of what is left of the Iron Garrison, who you helped in their attempt to reclaim Moria, and dwarves who were freed from Mordor. You break through the ice and enter Gundabad. Just before this moment you can also play an interlude chapter where you experience the Battle of Azanul Bizar, where Thorin gets his nickname Oakenshield and where many dwarves die in their attempt to fight their way into Moria. Here you see all the dwarf clans together for the first time, and the event proceeds very closely to the way they are described in the appendices of the Return of the King. After this interlude you fight your way into Gundabad, dealing with orcs, creatures and evil men from Angmar who entered the mountain from the north. Eventually you capture a goblin who was high in the ranks of Gorgar, and he tells you the story of how he tried to escape from Gundabad, only to run into the dragon Rimil Frostheart, who explains it was her who convinced Durin VII into this assault by speaking to him through the ice. From the captured goblin you also learn Gorgar bears a mithril hammer, which he is forbidden to bring with him when he speaks with the Frost Drake. This prompts Durin to try and steal this hammer, for it is clearly an item the dragon fears. After the successful theft, the goblin is safely released as thanks for his help. With the hammer in hand you travel to the room where the goblins originally found it, and after a dwarf completes a mosaic present in the chamber, a secret passage is revealed deeper into the mountain. In this chamber deep below the mountain, a tomb belonging to the dwarf Motsok was found, a rebellious dwarf who challenged Durin the Deathless in the first days of the dwarves. Motsok lives still and greets Durin like an old friend. Durin does not understand what's going on, and Motsok shows you and Durin VII visions of all the deaths of all the Durins that went before him. And he also shows you the origin of his rebellion against Durin the Deathless. From this story you learn that the mithril hammer was used long ago to drive off the dragons of Sauron who attacked Gundabad, and one of those dragons was Rimil, who was injured by the hammer. The memories of all his forefathers are awakened in Durin, and he turns out to really actually be the 7th reincarnation of the first dwarf to ever live. From his regained memories he finishes the tale that Motsok began. He reveals that during a war they fought with the orcs, Motsok and his people repented and helped the other dwarves defeat the armies of evil. After this war, Motsok was spared by Durin and lived out his years as a hermit in the chamber you find yourselves in. After his death, the Valar Aule, although he is called the first crafter in the game because of rights issues, gives him the dreaming sight, which enables him to watch in a long-lasting dream all the events of the world unfold. It was not the Frost Drake who spoke to Durin through the ice, but Motsok, and he gave Durin the thought of reclaiming his birthright, and for this service he may finally lay at peace soon. However, Motsok decides to walk the earth for one more day and wants to help Durin conquer Gundabad. Durin calls for a meeting between all dwarf leaders, and just after he declares Gundabad is not solely the property of his own clan, the Longbeards, but to all dwarves, Hrimil interrupts the meeting, but flees for Motsok and the Mithril Hammer. At the peak of Gundabad you wound Hrimil, and you can defeat the dragon in a separate raid if you wish. With its wounding, however, Gundabad is officially reclaimed for the dwarves. With his time come to an end, Motsok finally departs from the world. In the epilogue, Durin muses over the thought of reclaiming Moria as well, though he puts it aside from the moment. From the appendices of The Return of the King, we know he will eventually conquer the Dwarven Kingdom for good.